Hello everyone, I'm Justin and this is a full recap of Avatar, released in 2009. If you end up enjoying this video and want to see more from us, then make sure to click that subscribe button and click the bell to know anytime we upload a new video. Back in 2009, filmmaker James Cameron created what would go on to become the highest grossing film to date with Avatar, gaining a lifetime gross worldwide of $2.9 billion thanks to its incredible use of CGI that really hadn't been seen before, which resulted in it being one of the most visually impressive films in history. Despite the film's incredible success, it still took 13 years for the release of a sequel. But now, in 2022, we'll finally be returning to the world of Pandora in Avatar: The Way of Water, releasing December 16th. So before the release of the new film, we've decided to take a look back at everything that went down in the original, which you should go check out if you haven't already, as it'll be linked in the description. But if you have seen it and are just looking for a quick refresher, then you come to the right place. The movie opens in the year 2148 on the now overpopulated and polluted Earth, over a narration from a man named Jake Sully, a former US Marine paralyzed from the waist down during combat, who expresses his dissatisfaction with life and desire to find something worth fighting for. After a night of drinking, during which he had taken part in a bar fight after witnessing a man strike a woman, he's approached by two agents of the Resources Development Administration, who inform him that his twin brother Tommy was mugged and killed, which they explain has left the significant investment he represented vacant, as Tom was one of the few scientists selected to travel to and research the habitable moon Pandora, as part of the RDA's Avatar program. So in an attempt to save themselves the cost of replacing the investment Tom represents, they instead offer up his contract to Jake, as their genomes are identical. And Jake accepts, so he's later put in cryosleep and sent on a near 6-year journey to Pandora. Upon awakening, he, along with the other new arrivals, are given exopacks to help protect them from the toxic Pandoran atmosphere, and are sent into an RDA facility to be given a briefing from Colonel Miles Quaritch, their head of security, who explains the dangers they may come across on Pandora, with the biggest of them being the Na'vi, an indigenous population of humanoids. Jake's then taken by Dr. Norm Spellman, a biologist that had been working on the Avatar program with Tom, to see his avatar, which is revealed to be a genetically engineered human-Na'vi hybrid body created using the DNA of its driver as part of the genetic template that allows said driver to transfer their consciousness into it. And we also see that each avatar has been given similar facial characteristics as its driver. Norm also introduces him to Dr. Grace Augustine, the head of the Avatar program, but she doesn't seem pleased with the RDA's decision to replace one of her scientists with someone without any prior lab experience, and she expresses her displeasure to the RDA's head administrator on Pandora, Parker Selfridge. He doesn't care much for her complaints though, as his main concern is getting their hands on Pandora's extremely valuable mineral, unobtainium, which is the sole reason he's chosen to fund her research in the first place. The following day, Jake and Norm take their avatars on their first test drive, which proves to be a thrilling experience for Jake, as he's actually able to use his legs again, and he immediately heads out on a run. After returning to his human body, he's taken by one of the RDA's Marine pilots, Trudy Chacon, to meet with Colonel Quaritch, who's learned about his past as a Marine and sees his current position in the Avatar program as an opportunity to learn the intel he needs about the Na'vi from the inside. So he proposes that Jake act as his informant, and in return he'll see to it that he gets his legs back, and Jake agrees. Later, we follow him, Norm, Grace, Trudy, and another RDA soldier, Lyle Wainfleet, as they travel through the Pandoran flora to collect samples, and during their expedition, Grace takes them to visit the now abandoned school she had set up to teach the Na'vi English and the ways of humanity. But she quickly decides to exit after Jake notices and points out previously imprinted bullet holes in the wall. She and Norm then begin collecting the data they need, and as they do that, Jake wanders into an encounter with a group of Hammerhead Titan others, which he's instructed by Grace not to shoot nor run away from, and to just stand his ground. And this appears to work as they begin backing away, but it's soon revealed that there's another terrifying creature behind him, known as a Thanator, which forces him on the run, and in order to avoid death, he ends up having to jump off a cliff into the river below. Grace and the others attempt to search for him from above in their aircraft, but they're unable to locate him and are forced to leave as the night approaches. So Jake's left to fend for himself overnight, and he nearly doesn't succeed, as he's soon attacked by a pack of viper wolves. But fortunately, he's saved by a Na'vi woman named Natiri, who had discovered him there earlier and was prepared to kill him with her bow, but chose not to after a wood sprite, a pure spirit from their sacred tree, the Tree of Souls, landed on the tip of her arrow, which she took as a sign from Awa, the godlike spirit of the forest, that his life may be important. Being forced to kill the creatures frustrates her though, and she demands he not follow her, as she knows he's what the Na'vi call a dreamwalker sent from the Sky People. But he still continues following her anyway. and while doing so is once again seemingly chosen by the seeds of the sacred tree. So she decides to bring him to her people and introduce him to the leaders of the Omaticaya clan, Atu Khan the clan leader and Moat the Sahik, or spiritual leader, who also happen to be Neytiri's parents. To gain their favor, Jake convinces them that he's a warrior dreamwalker, seeking to learn their ways, and they eventually agree to teach him, assigning Neytiri to be his tutor. And after falling asleep alongside them in their home tree, he returns back to his human form in the lab and informs them of the situation he's found himself in. He also reports this information to Quaritch and Selfridge, who assign him the task of gaining the Navi's trust and convincing them to move from their current village within the next 3 months, as it's located right on top of an abundance of unobtainium. And if he's unable to do so, they'll just have to go with their backup plan of killing the indigenous for it. Early into his training under Neytiri though, his informant status is discovered by Dr. Augustine, but she doesn't directly confront him about it, and instead just moves them to a new location in the Hallelujah Mountains, the floating mountains of Pandora, along with Norman Trudy, although Jake's still able to communicate with Quaritch remotely. Their check-ins become less and less frequent over time though, as Jake becomes greatly invested in the Navi culture, dedicating a lot of his time and energy to learning and training under Neytiri, who he begins to grow a very close bond with. Throughout this process, he also gains the admiration of Grace, who he's able to get welcomed back into the village for the first time since her school was closed down, which we learn was due to an incident involving Neytiri's sister, Sully, who had grown angry with the RDA's work on Pandora, so she and a few other young Navi set an RDA bulldozer on fire in protest, which resulted in them being shot and killed as they fled back into the school, with Sawanin being shot right in front of her sister. Despite this upsetting history, Jake and Grace are able to continue regaining their favor now, and soon Jake is deemed ready to take part in the ritual of Iknamaya, a test every young hunter has to pass, in which you climb the path to the Banshee's nest and learn to control and form a Sahelu or neural connection with one of the aerial creatures, which Jake ultimately manages to do to the excitement of Neytiri and the shock and displeasure of the increasingly jealous Sute, the next warrior in line to become clan leader and who's supposed to be mated with Neytiri, as she's the next in line to assume the role of Sahik. Now, having chosen his own Banshee, Jake heads out aerial hunting with Neytiri, but the two are soon interrupted and attacked by an even greater aerial predator, a great Leonopteryx, known to the Navi as Taruk, which they narrowly manage to avoid, and later that night, Neytiri explains the creature's significance, informing Jake of her great-great-grandfather, who was only one of 5 Taruk Maktos in their history, a Navi individual who successfully managed to ride a great Leonopteryx, and she further explains the impact they had on bringing the tribes together in a time of crisis. By this point, Jake has reached the end of the 3 months he'd originally agreed upon with Quaritch, so he heads back to meet with him as ordered, and is told that he'll be heading back to Earth that night, where he'll then receive surgery to regain use of his legs. But Jake no longer seems concerned with getting his legs back, and is now more concerned with the well-being of the Omaticaya people, so he convinces Quaritch to give him more time, since he's supposed to be taking part in a ceremony that night to be made one of the people, which he believes will give him the opportunity to peacefully negotiate their relocation, and Quaritch seemingly agrees. After a successful ceremony, he's then taken by Neytiri to one of the clan's most sacred places, the Tree of Voices, where they can connect to the trees and hear the voices of their ancestors. And there, the two finally express their unspoken feelings for one another and share a kiss, before linking their neural cues, making them mated for life. The two then sleep within the forest through the night, until Neytiri is awakened the next morning by the sound of several RDA bulldozers tearing down the sacred land. The destruction doesn't wake up Jake though, as he's not yet entered his link unit in his human form, but fortunately he connects in time to avoid being demolished, and attempts to stop them by destroying one of the machine's cameras. But this just results in RDA soldiers opening fire at them, so they're forced to run off and make their way back to Hometree, where we see the Omaticaya preparing for war. Once there, he's quickly approached by an enraged Sute, who shoves him to the ground, and his attack continues upon learning he and Neytiri had mated, but Jake manages to get the better of their exchange. He then attempts to persuade them against engaging in a war with the Sky People, but is soon interrupted by Quaritch, who'd arrived in the Hallelujah Mountains after viewing the footage of Jake destroying the bulldozer's camera, resulting in him disconnecting him and Grace from their avatars, and once Jake awakens, Quaritch knocks him out with a punch to the face, and has the scientists transported back to their facility. Now, having seen where Jake's loyalty truly lies, Selfridge has Quaritch send in a team to take down the Omatikaya's forest. But to their surprise, their mission completely fails, as the team ends up dead and their equipment gets destroyed. So Quaritch pushes for the green light to just kill the indigenous, and Selfridge reluctantly agrees. Grace and Jake soon get word of this though, and confront Parker, questioning his morality, and they're ultimately able to gain one more hour to try and convince the Hometree to evacuate. They fail in their attempt though, after Jake reveals that he'd known of the Sky People's plans all along, which breaks Neytiri's heart, who angrily lashes out at him and rejects his attempt to comfort her. And this revelation also prompts Khan to order for Jake and Grace to be bound. But immediately after they're tied up, Quaritch and a large strike force come flying in and begin driving the people out of Hometree with gas rounds, before quickly switching to explosives that leave it engulfed in flames. Amid the destruction, a desperate Moat releases Jake and Grace from their bindings, and begs they help save her people. But there's not much left they can do, as Quaritch's strike force begins firing missiles at the tree's roots that send it crashing to the ground, and its destruction kills many of their people, including Khan, who's found impaled by a piece of debris by Neytiri, who he gifts his bow and tells to defend the clan before dying from his wound. With their mission failed and the Hometree destroyed, Jake and Grace are once again forced out of their avatars and are subsequently locked up along with Norm. But they don't stay in prison for long, as they eventually receive help from Trudy and a fellow scientist, Dr. Max Patel, who help release them from their cell before bringing them onto one of the RDA's ships, although Max stays behind so they can have someone they trust on the inside. As they're making their escape though, they're discovered by Quaritch, who opens fire on them and lands a shot that severely wounds Grace as they fly off. Still, they manage to make it to the Hallelujah Mountains and attach their base containing the link units to their aircraft before flying to and landing near the Tree of Souls, where the remaining Hometree have fled for safety. Once there, Jake re-enters his avatar and devises an insane plan to regain the people's faith. That plan being to tame a Taruk, which he successfully manages to do, making him the 6th Taruk Mahto in their history. And it works in restoring the clan's trust in him, including Neytiri and Sute. Having regained their favor, he begs for their help in saving Grace's life, and Moat agrees. So they begin a spiritual ritual to try and transfer her consciousness into her avatar's body permanently, using the Tree of Souls. But it's ultimately unsuccessful as her wounds prove to be too great. Just before she passes though, she awakens to tell Jake that she can see Awa, and that the entity is real. Although crushed by her loss, Jake is more motivated than ever to fight back against the Sky People, and gives a speech to the clan encouraging them to do the same. So, in preparation for their final stand, they fly to and recruit the other 15 clans on Pandora. But their growing army is soon discovered by Quaritch, who, for his next attack, plans on dropping a nuclear bomb on them and their holy ground, to put an end to their defiance once and for all. After learning of these plans from Max, Jake heads to the Tree of Souls in an attempt to appeal to Awa and gain her protection in battle, which takes place the following day, with Quaritch and his warships battling Na'vi warriors led by Jake, Neytiri, and Sute in the sky, while the remaining Na'vi forces, including Norm, come riding in on their dire horses to take on the RDA soldiers on the ground, some of whom enter in giant amp suits. Even with their added warriors though, it appears they still don't have enough firepower to defeat Quaritch and his forces, who begin to take out some of the Na'vi's most valuable troops, including Trudy, who's killed by a missile sent from Quaritch's aircraft, Norm, whose avatar is shot dead on the ground, although fortunately his human form survives, and Sute, who's impaled and sent plummeting to the ground following his failed attempt to take down the ships containing the bombs. Neytiri is also taken out of the sky following a fatal shot to her Banshee, and with the RDA soldiers slowly approaching her, she prepares to take them all on, knowing she'll likely die trying, despite Jake's orders to fall back. But just then, they recognize movement in the distance coming their way, which turns out to be the native wildlife of Pandora, joining the fight alongside the Na'vi.
Jake, Awa has heard you. Awa has heard you!
And now, with the help of Pandora's wildlife, the Na'vi are able to gain control of the battle, with the RDA's ground and aerial troops either being killed or forced to fall back. So Quaritch orders for the explosives to be dropped onto the Tree of Souls, but their attempt is thwarted by Jake, who comes flying down onto the aircraft containing the explosives and tosses a grenade to send it crashing towards the ground, before then also taking down Quaritch's warship, but he manages to escape its destruction in an amp suit. Enraged, Quaritch begins making his way towards their base containing Jake's link unit, and prepares to destroy it. But his attempt is once again thwarted, this time by Neytiri, who comes riding in on a Thanator. In her attack, she's able to destroy his autocannon, but he ultimately comes out on top after landing multiple stabs to the creature's abdomen and killing it, leaving Neytiri trapped under its lifeless body, who he then goes to kill as well, but before he can, he's interrupted by Jake, and the two have a back and forth brawl, during which Quaritch still manages to make his way to and break into their base, allowing the toxic Pandoran air to begin suffocating Jake's human form, which in turn allows him in his Na'vi form to be caught in Quaritch's clutches. But just before Quaritch can slash his throat, Neytiri makes it out from under the Thanator and launches 2 arrows straight through his chest, killing him. Jake, though, is still on the brink of death, as he's forced out of his avatar and ultimately falls unconscious from the Pandoran air, just before he can put on one of their exopacks. But fortunately, Neytiri realizes what's happening and makes her way over to their base, where she finds Jake and places one of the exopacks onto him, which works in resuscitating him. He then re-enters his avatar, and the two track down a dying Sute, who in his last moments gives Jake the title of clan leader and asks that he be the one to end his suffering, to which Jake reluctantly agrees and remorsefully euthanizes him. Although many lives were lost, the Na'vi were able to come out on top in their war against the Sky People, forcing the RDA to put an end to their operation on Pandora and head back to Earth, with only a few being chosen to stay. And we later see Jake saying goodbye to their lab in a final video log, in which he reveals he'll not be returning there again. And we later see why, as he's seen taking part in a ritual to transfer his consciousness into his avatar permanently, truly making him one of the people. And that was our full recap of James Cameron's Avatar. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. And let us know in the comments below what you thought of the film and how excited you are for the sequel. But once again, thank you all so much for watching, and I'll talk to you again soon.